Tensions are still running high in Zimbabwe following the announcement that Emmerson Mnangagwa of the ruling ZANU-PF party won the election. These wild scenes just a few hours ago when riot police broke up an opposition press conference ordering journalists to leave the premises. The presser did take place eventually, with the opposition party claiming there was foul play in the vote counting.
You don't give bullets, tanks, guns to those who have voted for you. You give celebration and jubilation. But if you go around the country, you will find that there is no jubilation, there is no celebration. If anything, today is a day of mourning. Mourning over democracy. It is a black day because we are seeing a repeat of what we saw during the yesteryear regime. Deprivation of people's will, rigging of the will of the people, manipulating the results, bastardizing the outcome of the elections.
Well, the relatively peaceful vote was marred by post-election scenes such as this, with bloody protests erupting and a number of people killed and wounded. The official electoral results from that election in Zimbabwe were released early this morning, with Mnangagwa taking 50.8% of the votes. His closest rival, Nelson Chamisa, garnering 44.3%, while the other 21 candidates took the remainder. Here is what Mnangagwa had to say to his opponent just a few hours ago.
Let us both call for peace and unity in our land. Call for both louder than ever. That is the role of leaders. That is our jointly responsibility as leaders. Even though discharged and fulfilled differently. To all Zimbabweans.
And joining us in the studios, our international affairs correspondent Bianca Zanini. And in Harare, we will go to Frank Chikowore, who's a broadcast journalist and a filmmaker. Frank, tell us, what is the situation on the ground there now? Are we expecting more violent protests?
Well, what we have seen in the past few minutes is that the police and the army are patrolling the streets in the central business district, and they're also patrolling the neighborhoods. They've been assaulting members of the public in public bars, and just in the afternoon, the armed police stormed a press conference where opposition leader Nelson Chamisa was scheduled to address. But following the intervention of acting Information Minister Simon Kaya Moyo, the press conference had to proceed. And Mr. Chamisa took the opportunity to condemn violence that was meted on protesters the day before yesterday. And as I speak, more than 25 people have since been arrested and charged with public violence. Chamisa also took the opportunity to tell the world that he garnered more than 2.3 million votes in Monday's election, contrary to the 2.1 million votes that were announced by the Electoral Commission here. But President Emmerson Mnangagwa said that if they are aggrieved, they are free to go to court.
And are you optimistic or pessimistic that the government and the opposition are going to be able to find some kind of compromise here?
Well, we asked Chamisa whether they are talking, that is him and Mr. Mnangagwa, but he denied that there are any discussions going on, and the MDC is determined that it is going to form the next government. He said that he is going to be approaching the courts and use other means available to him, such as constitutional means like protesting in the streets, although he did not mention this clearly. We have been talking to opposition activists who are saying that the only way out is to stage peaceful protests throughout the country.
Frank Chikowore, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Let's go now to Bianca Zanini. Bianca, the results were confirmed yesterday, but the opposition is still calling it a coup. So what is going on there?
Well, I think it's important here to keep in mind the context of these elections, right? This is the first time in decades that Zimbabwe is having a democratic election. It's the first time in 40 years almost that their previous longtime dictator, Robert Mugabe, wasn't on the ballot list. So these elections were supposed to be sort of this bellwether for Zimbabwe's future. The country is in deep financial trouble. They no longer have their own currency. They have a shortage of cash, of electricity, of water, and a lot of foreign investors have been keeping their eye on what was going to happen here. So there was a lot at stake, and even then they weren't able to keep this as smooth as possible. They still weren't able to keep the violence down, to keep the protests down. And the scenes of what we saw earlier today before the press conference, the images that our viewers saw here, really are likely to not only raise eyebrows, but also a lot of worries both inside and outside Zimbabwe.
And Bianca, there were observers at this election. Does the opposition have a case that this was a rigged vote?
Well, you're absolutely right. This was the first time in 16 years that there were international observers from the EU and from the US. And they've asked for the election results to be sort of broken down and explained area by area. Before the election day, though, analysts seem to say, and I heard this again and again, that we weren't going to have a completely free, completely democratic elections, so that it might not have been the greatest elections, but they might have been good enough just to move Zimbabwe away from its previous state to its next state with these first democratic elections.
So, Bianca, following on from all of this, what actually comes next?
Well, the hope is that what we saw today, what we've seen in the last few days, will in the longer term result in calmer times from Zimbabwe, because that's what's needed for any foreign investment, be it the US or be it China, to come and actually invest in the country that so desperately needs it right now. And so if we keep in mind that this is the first time that they've actually been able to have these democratic elections after a lot of violence and human rights violations and history of rigged voting, there is, some hope. It has been seen as a step forward from what we've seen before.
And it would be a shame after the years of Mugabe's rule if the country descended into political violence.
Well, right now we don't know.
We don't know.